all these little dog-eared pages, those are usually pages that I talk about, so we're not gonna talk about it much. Notice how this book begins. It begins kind of like one of the others does, in that it doesn't begin at number 4 Privet Drive. Okay? In fact, this one, even though it's not named, it does begin at a set specific place, which, if you know anything about British culture or British politics, it's number 10 Downing Street. It's the residence of the Prime Minister. The other minister, that title, the other minister, refers to the Prime Minister. It doesn't refer to the Minister of Magic. Okay? And so what do we see? We see the Prime Minister, notice not named, having what kind of week? Crappy one. Kind of like Mayor Paris is dealing with. Okay? What 3 events has the Prime Minister had to deal with as the novel opens?
Bridge collapse.
You got a bridge collapse, which if you saw the film, they made it be the Millennium Bridge, okay, across the Thames. It goes from essentially the Tate Modern Gallery to St. Paul's Cathedral, just about, okay? So it gets torn down by Death Eaters. What else? So you have the bridge collapse. Okay. Then you have what they think is a hurricane in the West Country, which means the area around Wales and Gloucestershire and that area, which is ridiculous because England's too far north for hurricanes. Okay. And then you have a series of murders. You've got the Brockdale murders that are referred to. Okay. And then you have this Vance murder. And then you have this Bones murder. Okay. We've met her in Order of the Phoenix. And in fact, then we met Emmeline Vance in Order of the Phoenix when Harry is taken off to number 12 Grimmauld Place. So the Minister of Magic, the former, I should say, Minister of Magic, arrives to speak to the Prime Minister. Fudge comes and he says, about page 3 or so, difficult to know where to begin, 3 or 4. Difficult to know where to begin, mutters Fudge. What a week, what a week. And the Prime Minister, oh, you've had a bad one too, huh? Fudge, yes, of course. I've been having the same week you have. Prime Minister, the Brockdale Bridge, not the Brockdale murders. Brockdale Bridge, Bones and Vance murders, and the ruckus in the West Country. So what does he mean? I've had the same week you've had. I did this 2 weeks ago. This is our world. This is Fudge's world. What is Rowling suggesting?
The worlds aren't that far separated.
Yeah. They're the same. What's the only difference? Okay, one knows about the other. What else? Our world, what? Doesn't see the other one. So, our world is the physical world. Their world is, what do you want to call it? You can't call it non-physical because you can touch Harry. But I don't think the physical and whatever other word we're looking for is necessarily the way to look at it. I think this all ties back to what we saw beginning with the Mirror of Erised. And then when we saw the ghost, the spirit, the memory, whatever you want to call the thing, of Tom Riddle come out of the diary, okay? And then we saw the, let's use Dumbledore's terms, the echoes come out of the wand. Clearly not echoes, I believe. Okay? And then we heard the voices behind the veil in the Order of Phoenix. And Harry speaks to Luna at the end of Order of Phoenix, and she says, come on, Harry. When she says, it's not like I won't see my mom again. And he's like, what? And she says, come on, Harry. You heard them. The voices behind the veil. And what did she say? There were people there. Where? Behind the veil. Just out of sight. I can't think of a better way of putting it. So I'm going to call it the spiritual world. Okay? What is Rowling saying? Why do bad things, in the opening of this chapter, happen to the Prime Minister? Or to the Prime Minister's world? Exactly. It's because of what's going on in this world. In Harry's world. Notice, the bleeding isn't going the other way. That is, the bad stuff isn't happening in Harry's world because of ISIS in our world. These things happen in the Prime Minister's world because of Voldemort in this world. Okay? So these things are kind of bleeding through. And the Prime Minister says, what, you mean some of your people were involved in those events? Were they? Fudge, of course they were. Surely you've realized what's going on. Okay, in almost every instance in these novels, when someone says, surely you've realized that, what do you immediately know? No, surely they haven't realized that. That's a rhetorical device to say, come on, catch up to speed. You hang with me now. We're going to go for a roller coaster of a ride, and you've got to stick with me. Even Dumbledore uses it to Harry. Dumbledore uses it as a teaching device. Okay? So, we get a long description of of Fudge's visits over the last several years, including 2 years previously when Fudge had to come kind of hat in hand and say, he's back. Okay? Or, excuse me, 1 year ago when Fudge had to do that. So, bottom about page 10 or so. The Prime Minister, I'm sorry, I've got the British edition because I've lost my American one, or one of my kids stole it or something. And the page numbering is not the same. So the Prime Minister says, good grief, so it's your fault those people were killed and I'm having to answer questions about rusted rigging and corroded expansion joints and I don't know what else. It's your fault all this crap's happening on my watch. Okay? So Fudge goes on and explains how morale is down at the Ministry of Magic. Why? Because Amelia Bones died. Prime Minister doesn't know who Amelia Bones is. But who was Amelia Bones? Now, she was involved in Harry's trial. In what capacity? She was in charge of magical law enforcement. She was the head of the Aurors. Her sister was one of the original members of the Order of the Phoenix. She has a niece, okay, at school, who had in fact been one of Dumbledore's army. So you notice how these kind of tendrils or these tentacles just kind of keep reaching out. They keep spreading. Okay? So Fudge has to say, of course it's our, coming from our side. How else would you explain these two murders? Both murdered inside locked rooms and no cause of death. But it was clear they didn't just die of old age. Okay? So, we see the Prime Minister get introduced to Rufus Scrimgeour. We find out Kingsley Shacklebolt is going to be a bodyguard, essentially, for the Prime Minister. Poor old Kingsley Shacklebolt's doing, kind of triple duty because he's all over the place in this novel. And then we go to the next chapter, Spinner's End. What does that word end mean? Well, let me back up. What, first of all, is Spinner's End, literally, in the novel? What is this? Louder.
Place.
It's a street name. Okay. Who lives at the end of Spinner's End? Snape. Okay? So it's a street. And at the end of it is Snape's house. Along the side of it, on one side, is a ratty, rusted out, abandoned factory. So what's the neighborhood like that Snape lives in when he's not at Hogwarts? Belmead? Brentwood? No. Okay. Pretty run down. In other words, Snape lives where? Projects? That would be the closest thing to this. Okay? Spinner's End. What does end mean? It's got multiple meanings in English. What are some of the meanings? I mean, this gives you kind of the idea of one of them. It's the last point, right? It's the termination or the terminus, okay? So what else can it mean? So it can mean completion or something finished or the terminal point. What else can it mean?
Death.
Death?
Like, you met your untimely end.
Okay, an untimely end can mean death. What about in the phrase ends and means? Or something is a means to an end. Does that mean that it's a means to a completion? Partially. But completion in what sense? What is the end of this bottle? It's not this. What's the end of this key? You get what I'm getting at? What's the end of this marker? This one has multiple ones. What's the end of this? I'll use this particular thing. Telephone. End also refers to its purpose. What's the purpose of a telephone? The Greek words in it tell you. Tele, distance, phone, sound. Long distance sound. Television, long distance seeing. Okay? What's the end of this container? To hold liquid. That's it. It's not built to hold sand. You can put sand in it, but that's not what it's designed for. What is the end of the marker? To mark. Okay? Spinner's end. What is the end or the purpose? Now of spinners. Well, what kind of spinners? What things spin? A top? Yeah, a top spins. Tires spin. What other kinds of things spin, however, spin with a purpose? Louder?
Spiders?
Spiders. What do they spin? They spin webs. For what purpose? To catch things. Okay? They spin webs to catch things. Who, at the end of this chapter, is caught in a web? Think about it. Snape is there. Narcissa shows up with her sister, Bellatrix Lestrange. Narcissa Malfoy and Bellatrix Lestrange. What does Narcissa want Snape to do?
To fulfill the task Malfoy is going to send.
Exactly. She gets him to swear an unbreakable vow. Why is it called an unbreakable vow? We find out later on. Because you can't break it. Well, you can actually.
Because you die.
But you die if you do. So if you don't mind dying. Okay. Now, since we only have one night, I'm going to give away something. In fact, I'm going to give away something from book 7. Sorry, what?
I'm just kidding. I've read it.
Does anybody not finish book 7? Have you not finished them?
I'm almost there. It's okay. Go ahead.
Okay.
Give it away.
Well, I maybe not. Will be able not to.
Sorry, guys.
What kind of spinning? Let me put it this way. Who is spinning, let's say, webs? Snape?
Don't worry.
Is Snape spinning them, or is Snape the one getting caught on them? Dumbledore? Voldemort? Okay. Is Harry spinning webs? No, Harry's kind of like Hamlet. He's the most observed of all observers. Everybody's kind of, poor Harry's just trying to make his way in the world. Okay? Dumbledore, definitely. And here we find out, and I'll give a little bit. At the end of book 7, Dumbledore's webs are, one, much more extensive than we ever imagined, and much deeper than we ever imagined. Okay? So what kind of web does Snape get caught in? He agrees to do the unbreakable vow. What does he agree in the unbreakable vow? And notice there's all kinds of talk in that chapter between Snape and Bellatrix. Why? What does Bellatrix keep hammering Snape about? Keep in mind, where has Bellatrix been the last 14 years? She was in Azkaban until she got broken out in book 5. Okay? Why was she in Azkaban?
Torture of Neville's parents.
Because she tortured Neville's parents. She was taken in with Barty Crouch Jr. Okay? Where was Snape the last 14 years? Living the high life, man. He had everything going great for him. So she's kind of bitching at him about that. She wants to know, why is it Snape has not been punished? She wants to know, why is it Voldemort trusts Snape? What does Snape say? Ask him. I'm not going to tell you what the Dark Lord and I share in confidence. The Dark Lord trusts me. Maybe you should too. Or do you think the Dark Lord is wrong? Why don't you go tell him you think he's wrong? You know. Okay, she's not going to do that. So, Narcissa asked him to do this unbreakable vow. Why? Why is she so desperate? Louder.
To save Draco.
She wants to save Draco. Why? Because he's a precious little angel? She says mother. What does this show about Narcissa? This is going to seem really, really trite and basic.
Of anything, she's his mother.
Keep going. What is she showing for Draco?
Love.
Love! The same kind of love as who showed for whom?
Lily.
Lily showed for Harry. In other words, she's willing to do anything. Okay? Notice what she's asking in the unbreakable vow. What does she want Snape to do?
Do the task for him if he has to.
Exactly. Do the task that the Dark Lord has charged Draco to do if Draco cannot complete it. And if he doesn't, if Snape doesn't do what Draco can't do, what would happen to Snape? He would die. Okay. Jump to the lightning struck tower towards the end of the novel, which they completely bastardized in the film. I mean, really, really ruined it. Because what do we see happen in that scene? I know, I'm skipping a hell of a lot. Okay? Lightning. The lightning struck tower is where? It's not the cave, it's chapter 27. Okay? We're at chapter 2. We have Draco there, we have Harry there, we have Dumbledore there. Later on, Finger Greyback shows up, and a couple of others. Okay? What does Dumbledore do to Harry? An impediment or curse. He makes it so Harry can't move, and he can't make a sound in the book. What do they do in the film?
Just gotta roll those.
Harry's just underneath the top level of the tower. Snape comes up and does what? Okay, think about that for a moment. Snape tells Harry to be quiet, and Harry's going to listen? No, not in this world or any alternate version of reality of this world. Would Harry do that when he knows Dumbledore is in what state up above him? I don't mean what state, like, Michigan. I mean, what physical state? Weak?
He's vulnerable.
Vulnerable? How weak is he? He's mostly dead. He's not yet fully dead. So when he says, Severus, please, what's he saying? Make it quick. See, Dumbledore already knows at that point, he's a dead man. Not because of Snape. Dumbledore has two things making him a dead man at this point. What are they? One of them is his hand,
And the curse from
and the potion that he drank in the cave. So he's been poisoned with the potion that he drank, and he's got this curse that was in Slytherin's ring that he tried to crack open that started to spread up his wand hand. Why up his wand hand? Why not his non-dominant hand? And we are told in the book that it's his right hand. So why not his left hand? Is it that he can't use his wand with his left hand? Is he, like a T-Rex or something? No. What is your dominant hand for you? Okay, keep going. Any of you ever had the hand that you write with broken or completely immobilized, and you tried to use your other hand unless you're ambidextrous? It's not debilitating. It's a pain in the ass. Okay? A couple of years ago, I totally tore this rotator cuff. My arm was just hanging. Couldn't do anything. So I had it operated on, had this thing, and I had to write notes and stuff on the board with my left hand. And it was like sorry, don't mean to be offensive. It was like a retarded 5-year-old moron came in. Okay? It's pretty bad. So what's that say about that dominant hand? That represents what for a wizard? Their power. So Dumbledore's just kind of laying there against the wall, he's like this. And Malfoy says, "You're totally at my mercy." And Dumbledore's like, "No, I'm not." And this isn't like Princess Bride, just give me a minute because I'm going to get up. And he does it. It's not that. Dumbledore means something else when he says, "You're at my mercy." What is the "my mercy" Dumbledore's talking about? Oh, look, here he comes right now. And Snape arrives. Okay? The unbreakable vow is important. It's extremely important to come when it does. Because it shows us Snape puts himself willingly in an obligation. And that obligation requires what of him? Or let me put it this way. That obligation puts him in what? Proverbial expression. You've all heard this expression. Between a rock and a hard place. Or use another one. He's in a catch-22. Think about it. He is damned. No matter what he does. If he doesn't do the unbreakable vow, and Draco can't. And it's pretty clear from early on, whatever this thing is, Draco's pretty inept at it. And there's a reason for that. His heart isn't in it. Okay? So, if he doesn't do this thing, then what? He dies. And if he does do this thing, then what? What does Harry learn about Horcruxes? What must you do to perform or make a Horcrux? You have to kill somebody. Okay? Is it just merely killing somebody and there's an automatic Horcrux? No, there is a complex spell involved. Okay? So, you have to kill somebody. What does that do when you kill somebody? It splits your soul. So, Snape either dies or he splits his soul. That's a damn tough position to be in. Okay? And he either dies or he kills his mentor. Is Dumbledore Snape's mentor? I'm saying no. Why not?
Well, you never really see any sort of mentorship going on there. At least I didn't.
Okay.
It's more Voldemort mentoring Snape at this point. Yeah.
Even in book 7? Even when we see, and I'll give a little bit away, but not much. Even when we see Snape's final memory?
I can see how you say that he is his mentor.
I mean, because Dumbledore's kind of guiding him along as well. I mean, without giving anything away, the reason Snape turns, okay, is because Dumbledore offers him what? Think about it. This is Dumbledore's offering Snape his shot at redemption. You feel bad about what you did? Okay. Here's how you can, it's not here's how you can make it right. Because he can't make that right? After all, no spell brings back the dead. But what can he do? He can at least attempt to, protect someone, okay? So, after Spinner's End, we get Will and Wonk. Dumbledore comes to collect Harry. And what do we see happen? We get a description of Harry's room, and there are newspapers lying around. And we get snippets from each of the newspapers. Notice. Page 34, for example. Harry Potter, the chosen one? Question mark. If that were in Hebrew, it would say, whatever the Hebrew would be for Harry Potter, the Messiah. That's what chosen one means. Is Harry the Messiah? Is Harry the Savior? Okay. Then there's another newspaper. Scrimgeour succeeds Fudge. Okay. Then there's another one. Ministry guarantees student safety. Okay. And then we get the nice little pamphlet about what the Ministry of Magic suggests you should do to protect yourself now during this time of utter darkness and despair. In the pamphlet, the guidelines are actually similar to something that our government produced after 9/11. Because there was all kinds of talk about there might be a gas attack, there could be a radiological dirty bomb. Okay, and the federal government, I am not kidding, I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember, but the federal government suggested, not necessarily stockpiling, but having on hand some large, like black trash bags and duct tape that you could cover your windows with to help keep the radiation out. The kind of radiation that you go to get an x-ray and they put an inch thick lead vest over you to stop, and 0.001 mil of plastic's going to stop it. Like, the Soviets want to nuke Nashville. Here, come do duck and cover. Get under your little desk. It'll protect you. When I grew up in California, I was 20 miles away from Lockheed Martin. Lockheed, which meant we were ground zero. Lockheed, Moffett Field, which is where the U-2 spy planes flew out of. Okay, Gary Powers shot down over the Soviet Union. I mean, the whole Bay Area, this is Silicon Valley, would have all been nuked. Okay, and we had those regular stupid drills like once a month. Duck and cover, get under there. That'll protect you in case, a 10 megaton bomb,
Yeah, that's fine.
Well, you're advised not to leave the house alone. Gee, really? This is the government's wisest minds coming up with stuff like this? Okay. And then we see Harry's note from Dumbledore. So Dumbledore shows up. He stands around the door. At the door, the Dursleys are looking at him. Dumbledore's like, judging by your look of stunned disbelief, Harry did not warn you that I was coming. However, let's assume, this is about page 44 or so, let's assume that you have invited me warmly into your house, and he steps in. And he keeps making these assumptions. Why? Okay. What is this showing us on the Dursleys' part? What are they not good at? That Arthur started to try to teach them. Manners. Even though when Petunia drinks, she gets that pinky out there. She's going to make sure everyone knows she's a lady. Okay? But when it comes to welcoming strangers in, well, they just don't hold with that nonsense, right? And think of Dumbledore. How strange is he? Right? Pretty strange. So Dumbledore goes in, and Vernon says, I don't mean to be rude, or something like that. And Dumbledore finishes his sentence for him. Yet sadly, accidental rudeness occurs alarmingly often. Wham! That's like a Carly Fiorina to Donald Trump. He takes it off at the knees. Best to say nothing at all, my dear man. What's he mean?
Shut up.
Yeah, because if you open your mouth, you will be rude. Vernon can't help it. Okay? So, Dumbledore introduces himself. He says, we've corresponded. Really? How have they corresponded? He's talking to Petunia. He's not talking to Vernon. Letter left with the deadbeat baby on the doorstep.
And the Howler.
And the Howler. Book 7. And all the letters that Lily wrote to Dumbledore. Excuse me. That Petunia wrote to Dumbledore after Lily got accepted into Hogwarts, begging to be accepted. And Dumbledore had to say, nope. Why? Not a drop of magic in her. Okay. So when he says we've corresponded, we don't at this point know that. But when we get to that point in book 7, it's like, oh, that's... Okay. So, Dumbledore goes on and explains about the problem of Sirius's will. He calls Creature. Harry gives Creature an order. Creature obeys, so that part is solved. So Harry now has a big old massive house in London. Okay? And his own house elf. But then Dumbledore says there's something else. About page 52 or so. He tells the Dursleys while their drinks keep, their drinks that are levitating keep whacking them on the heads because they won't drink them. And Dumbledore says, it would have been polite to drink it. 52, however, Dumbledore says one last thing. Harry comes of age in a year's time. And Petunia says no. No, he doesn't. He's a month younger than Dudley. Dudley doesn't turn 18 till the year after. Dumbledore says, yeah, but we turn adult a year before. Okay? And he says, and now, as you already know, the wizard called Lord Voldemort has returned to this country. Talks about state of open warfare. Voldemort has already attempted to kill Harry on a number of occasions, so he's in greater danger now than the day when I left him upon your doorstep 15 years ago. And then he pauses. Just after saying, I left him with you in the hope that you would raise him and care for him as though he were your own. And then he pauses for dramatic effect. You did not do as I asked. You have never treated Harry as a son. He has known nothing but neglect and often cruelty at your hands. The best that can be said is that he has at least escaped the appalling damage you have inflicted upon the unfortunate boy sitting between you. And Dudley's sitting there, and he's going, what? What do you mean? He looks at Harry, scrawny, kind of underfed. Dudley, probably bulging with muscles, or he should be, having been the boxing champion the previous year. And Vernon says, us mistreat dudders. How old is Dudley? Guys, you're 16 years old. You want your dad calling you dudders? Like, us mistreat Timmy. Or Mikey. Okay? Dumbledore raises his finger. Silence. The magic I evoked 15 years ago means that Harry has powerful protection, while he can still call this house home. However miserable he has been here, however unwelcome, however badly treated, you have at least grudgingly allowed him house room. In other words, you didn't kick him out. But this magic will cease the moment he turns 17. Okay? So he says, all I ask is this. Allow him to come home to this house once more next summer, before his 17th birthday, which will ensure that the protection continues until that time. Okay? None of the Dursleys said anything. Dudley's frowning slightly. He's trying to figure out how he's been mistreated. Vernon looks like he's about to gag. He's got something stuck in his throat. But Aunt Petunia was oddly flushed. Why? She's embarrassed. Why is she embarrassed? Remember what experience Harry had at the beginning of Order of the Phoenix? When he has to go in and tell them Lord Voldemort's back, he's after me. There were Dementors, And she says, "They guard the wizarding prison, Azkaban." And he kind of looks at her for the first time and realizes what about her? She's his mother's sister. He's never seen her in that way before. He's seen her as Aunt Petunia, but never as Mom's sister. And that because she was Mom's sister, she grew up with Mom, and she probably heard some of the stories that Mom had to tell. So, Dumbledore and Harry leave. They go off to Horace Slughorn's. They talk Slughorn into going to Hogwarts. Okay. Dumbledore takes Harry off to the Burrow, and he tells Harry to do what? Before he leaves, he says, "I'm sure you haven't told anyone about the prophecy." And he tells him to do what? Trust in your friends, Harry. He says, "You can tell Ron and Hermione." Why? What is Rowling suggesting? Do any of us ever go through life all alone? Now, we Americans, and I'm far right wing, so I'm totally cool with the whole rugged individualism, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, kick everybody else, out of your way, kind of thing. Climb the corporate ladder with a knife in the back of the guy ahead of you, kind of a thing. Okay. What's Dumbledore saying? You can't do it by yourself, Harry. I mean, what was one of the issues he had to confront in Order of the Phoenix? He had all that rage and all that anger because he kept thinking, I'm the one who, had to fight Voldemort off by myself. I'm the one who... What did it take at the Ministry of Magic? It took Harry and Ron and Hermione and Neville and Luna and Ginny and then the Order of the Phoenix and then Dumbledore. If it had been just Harry, how long would it have lasted? Not long at all. If it had been just Frodo, how far would he have gotten? Probably once he got in the river on the boat, he wouldn't have gotten to the other side. He'd gotten down the falls, that'd be it. Not very far. Okay? So she seems to be suggesting we all need help. None of us is independent. We're all dependent on each other. Okay? Chapter 6, Draco's Detour, where Harry spies Draco at Borgin and Burke's. Slug Club on the train, I'm going to skip. Snape victorious. Where Malfoy finally gets to do what he's been wanting to do to Harry for a long time and stomps on his face because he catches Harry spying on him. It's not an accident, by the way, I don't think, that Rowling has Malfoy stomp on his face. Okay, that's a classic image from literature of fascism, of Nazis, of communists. It's an image right out of Orwell's 1984. Okay, where one of the leaders of the party says, "This is our idea of the future. The boot of the party on the face of the parole forever." That is, us keeping in power and you doing our work for us. Okay? But Harry, you gotta admit, kind of has it coming, right? Does he belong in Malfoy's cabin? No. He thinks because he has the invisibility cloak, and maybe a little bit because of the prophecy, he can do whatever he wants. So, Tonks helps him. Harry goes up to the school. He's met by Snape. And Snape takes a bunch of points away from Hogwarts. Harry gets into the school. And chapter 9, the Half-Blood Prince. Snape has potions. Harry has potions. What job has Snape finally gotten? The job he's been wanting for 16 years. Defense against the dark arts. Who took potions? Horace Slughorn. Right? And we find out early in the chapter, about page 174 or so, Neville's talking with McGonagall, and Neville wants to be an Auror, which means he has to take certain classes for his newts. And McGonagall says, I'm sorry, Longbottom, but I cannot let you into my newt class. I see that you have an exceeds expectations in charms. However, why not try for a newt in charms? My grandmother thinks charms is a soft option. McGonagall, take charms. I shall drop Augusta a line, reminding her. Now notice what McGonagall does here. I don't know what the law is in England, and I don't know what the law would be in the magical world, but if it was anything like the United States, what McGonagall does here, she breaks a federal law. It's called FERPA, Family Educational Rights Protection Privacy Act. Okay? If one of your parents called me up to find out how you were doing in class, I am legally obligated to just say, ask your son or daughter. I can't tell you anything. Even if they're paying, even if this were Harvard, and they're paying $70,000 a year, I couldn't tell them anything. Okay? Because of the FERPA law. So what does she do? Take charms, and I shall drop Augusta a line, reminding her that just because she failed her charms owl, the subject, notice, her charms owl, which Neville did what? Exceeds expectations. That's just one below outstanding. The subject is not necessarily worthless. Okay? And she smiles because Neville has this look of incredulity on his face, like, grandmother sucks. So she's just, she's giving him inside information there. Okay? So Snape comes in and he starts to teach them defense against the dark arts, around page 177. He talks about the previous teachers, and he says they've all had their methods and priorities. Okay, let's talk about those for a minute. Quirrell, idiot. Well, maybe not idiot, but slave of the Dark Lord. Gilderoy Lockhart, idiot. Lupin, he's good. Barty Crouch Jr., a.k.a. Mad-Eye Moody, good, but servant of the Dark Lord, And then Dolores Jane Umbridge. I won't use the word I would normally use for her. Given this confusion, I'm surprised so many of you scraped an owl. So he goes on and talks about the dark arts. The dark arts, and he uses a tone of voice like he's describing, pardon me for the image, but I can't think of anything that's more appropriate than this. His naked girlfriend or wife. I mean, he's just using a sensuous tone of voice. This is somebody who's in love with this material. The dark arts are many, varied, ever-changing, notice, and eternal. Fighting them is like fighting a many-headed monster, which each time a neck is severed sprouts a head even fiercer and cleverer than before. You are fighting that which is unfixed, mutating, indestructible. What does that mean? You are fighting that which is unfixed, mutating, indestructible. You can't win, is essentially what he's saying. You can't win. You might be able to do what? Buy time. What does Gandalf say in The Lord of the Rings? We might be able to stop this evil, but we can't do what? Stop all evil. Okay? We might be able to defeat the evil of our time, but not all evil. Harry stared at Snape. It was surely one thing to respect the dark arts as a dangerous enemy, another to speak of them as Snape was doing, with a loving caress in his voice. But who is going to understand them better? A former practitioner? Or someone who's just read about them? Who do you want to teach you how to drive a car? A race car driver? Or some fat old white guy who just sits behind a desk all day, who doesn't drive? Okay? I prefer Mario Andretti, myself. So, Snape says, your defenses must therefore be as flexible and inventive as the arts you seek to undo. Meaning, what? Is it merely memorizing stuff from a book? No. It's being able to do what? Adapt. Think fast on your feet. Okay? Let's skip a bunch again. So, Harry doesn't have a potion book, so he takes one out of the cabinet, and it belongs to the Half-Blood Prince. Chapter 10, he has his first lesson with Voldemort. It's got to be that kind of thing. He has his first lesson with Dumbledore. And he goes up to Dumbledore's office, and about page 187. Dumbledore says, it's time that you know what prompted Lord Voldemort to try and kill you 15 years ago. Harry's like, wait, you said last year you told me everything. And so I did. I told you everything I know. He says, from here on out, we start to go off into conjecture. Okay? Harry, but you think you're right. Who, when they're making guesses, doesn't think they're right? Who makes a guess and then says, but I know I'm wrong? And then you act on that. Nobody does that. Okay? So Dumbledore says, of course, I think I'm right. Okay? But, he says, as I've already proven to you, I make mistakes like the next man. In fact, being, forgive me, rather cleverer than most men, my mistakes tend to be correspondingly huger. In other words, if I screw up, it's a really big screw up. Okay? Harry. And this has something to do with the prophecy. Notice, what's going on in Harry's mind? What does Harry want to learn about? How do I stop the prophecy? What has Harry already told Dumbledore? I can't kill him. I'm not a killer. Okay? So, they go into Dumbledore's collected memory. This isn't one of Dumbledore's memories. This is a memory he collected from somebody else. And we watch Bob Ogden go off to the House of Gaunt. Okay? We see Marvolo Gaunt, we see Morphin Gaunt, and we see Merope Gaunt. Marvolo the father, Morphin, Merope, son and daughter. We also see Tom Riddle ride by. Okay? And Bob Ogden is there because Morphin has used magic on some muggles. Okay, so we're going to skip a bunch. And Dumbledore takes Harry out of the memory, around page 210. Says, I think that'll do. Harry, what happened to the girl in the cottage? Why does he ask? Who's the girl in the cottage to Harry? Is she anybody? Does he know who she is? Has he put two and two together? No, he hasn't. So why does he ask? What does this show us on Harry's part? What have we seen? Put it this way. What have we seen about the girl in the cottage? What kind of life does she have? Think Disney. Whose life does she have? Minus Prince Charming. She's Cinderella. Okay? She serves her father and brother. She is treated like dirt. It's implied, though not stated, that she's probably beaten. Okay? So this is Harry's, that aspect of him that wants to care for and protect others. Maripe, or whatever her name was. Dumbledore, she survived. And Dumbledore mentions Marvolo. Harry, Marvolo? That's right. Glad to see you're keeping up. Harry's thinking, Marvolo? I know that name. Tom. You mean that old man was Voldemort's grandfather? Marvolo, his son Morphin, and his daughter Maripe were the last of the Gaunts. Harry, so Maripe was, does that mean she was, come on, Harry. Man, he's slow. Voldemort's mother? It does. And we also saw a glimpse of Voldemort's father. The Muggle, the man on the horse? Very good. And they ended up married? I think you're forgetting Maripe was a witch. I don't believe her magical powers appeared to their best advantage when she was being terrorized by her father. And so he asked Harry, can you think of any measure Maripe could have taken to make Tom Riddle forget his Muggle companion and fall in love with her instead? And notice what Harry immediately thinks of. Imperius Curse? Or a love potion? Dumbledore says, yeah, probably the latter. Would have seemed more romantic. So he talks about how they broke up. And then Harry says, in Maripe, she died, didn't she? Wasn't Voldemort brought up in an orphanage? Yes, indeed. And he says, now we have to do a little bit of guessing. We have to fill in the blank DNA, as it were. Tom Riddle came back, said he'd been hoodwinked. And Harry says, but she did have his baby. Dumbledore, yeah, but not until a year after they were married. Tom Riddle left her while she was still pregnant. What went wrong? Why did the love potion stop working? Dumbledore, guesswork. I believe that Maripe, who was deeply in love with her husband, could not bear to continue enslaving him by magical means. I believe she made the choice to stop giving him the potion. In other words, she gave him what? A choice. Notice the exact opposite of an Imperius Curse. She gives him the choice. He turns tail and runs. Perhaps she'd convinced herself that he would by now have fallen in love with her in return. Perhaps she thought he would stay for the baby's sake. Wrong. He said, that's enough, Harry. Harry says, so it's important to know all this about Voldemort's past. Very important. And it's got something to do with the prophecy. Harry's thinking, and this will give me a silver bullet to, through the heart. Am I allowed to tell Ron and Hermione everything? He says, yes. He says, but don't tell anybody else. Harry, no, don't worry. And then Harry says, points to a table. It says, that ring. Yes. You were wearing it when we visited Professor Slughorn that night. So I was. Isn't it the same ring Marvolo showed Ogden? Very same, but acquired it recently, Harry. About the same time you injured your hand. Right, sir? About that same time. How exactly? Good night, Harry. Okay. Hermione's helping hand, very end of the chapter, we find out that everybody else, when they came up to Hogwarts this year, this is about probably around page 249 or so. Hermione says, we were all searched when we arrived. Harry, were you? I wasn't. Hermione says, oh no, you weren't, were you? Filch ran over all of us with secrecy sensors when we got in the entrance hall. Any dark object would have been found. Why? Plot. Just think plot. Why was Harry... Oh, should I ask this question? Yeah, what the heck? Why was Harry not gone over with a secrecy sensor? If any dark object would have been found, what would have been found in Harry? The big old Horcrux that is Harry. Okay? Silver and opals. They talk a lot about who the Half-Blood Prince could be. Hermione doesn't like whoever the Half-Blood Prince is. She doesn't like Harry using this book. Okay? In fact, page about 253, we find out Harry's trying some of the spells in the potions book, and he points his wand at nothing in particular and says, Levicorpus, which has parenthesis NVBL written after it. And he says the Levicorpus inside his head, because NVBL means nonverbal. And all of a sudden we hear, ah! Flash of light, room's full of voices, everyone woken up. Ron let out a yell. Harry throws the book. Ron's dangling upside down in midair. Harry, sorry, I'll let you down. Gropes for the potion book, finds the page. Praying that this was the counter jinx, says Libera Corpus. Levicorpus, levitate the body. Libera Corpus, free the body. Okay? Then Ron falls. Okay? While Dean and Seamus roar with laughter. Okay? So they put on a whole bunch of Mrs. Weasley sweaters, and they do it to each other. They levitate each other and laugh and have fun about it. And the next day they're talking to Hermione, and Hermione says, when Harry says, I saw my dad use it. Hermione says, well, maybe your dad did use it, but he's not the only one. We've seen a whole bunch of people use it, in case you've forgotten. Dangling people in the air, making them float along, asleep, helpless. When? Where? Quidditch World Cup. Only the people doing that were Death Eaters. Harry's like, but we're not Death Eaters. With the sinking teeling, he foo. Remembers the behavior of the Death Eaters. Harry, that was different. They were abusing it, says Ron. Harry and his dad were just having a laugh. Isn't that what the Death Eaters were doing? Just having a laugh? Hermione, I think it's irresponsible to start performing spells when you don't even know what they're for. Harry's going to come across a spell in the book. Sectum Sempra. He doesn't know what it does. And he's going to get into a very quick duel with Malfoy. And that's going to fly out of his mouth. And what nearly happens? He nearly kills Malfoy. He ends up with a big black gash across his chest. And he's bleeding profusely. Harry's like, oh my God, I'm sorry. Okay. Page to whatever it is. Go back to about 243, 244. Ron says for the first time in the books, little two-word expression, thank God. Okay? Probably doesn't mean anything here, and by that mean have any deeper significance. Thank God, shivered Ron as they were enveloped by warm, toffee-scented air. Let's stay here all afternoon. He says that because they get out of the cold winter air as they go into Honeydukes. Okay? But we're going to start seeing that phrase used more frequently, and it gets used a lot in Book 7. And probably where it does have meaning behind it. Okay? So they run into Slughorn, which I'm going to skip, and we see Katie Bell get injured by the necklace. Harry goes to tell McGonagall, wants to tell Dumbledore that he thinks it's all Malfoy. And we get the secret riddle. Harry has another lesson with Dumbledore. And he asks him, about page 274, 275, where were you this weekend? Dumbledore, I'd rather not tell you. I'll tell you in good time. You will? Dumbledore, I expect so. Okay. So they talk a little bit, and Dumbledore says, let's go back to where we were. So you will remember, I'm sure, that we left the tale of Lord Voldemort's beginnings at the point where the handsome muggle Tom Riddle it sounds like a soap opera, had abandoned his witch wife Maripay and returned to his family home in Little Hangleton. Maripay was left alone in London. Harry, how do you know she was in London? And Dumbledore tells him because of the evidence of Caractacus Burke. And he pulls a thought out, and he puts it in the pensive and swirls it around a little bit. And we see Caractacus Burke come out of it and talk. And we see that Maripay had sold Caractacus Burke of Borgin and Burke's the locket that once belonged to Salazar Slytherin. Okay? He bought it for 10 galleons. Okay, now what would this be equivalent to? How long ago did Salazar Slytherin live? About 1,000 years. So go back 1,000 years from today, 1015. This would be like having a locket, if you're in England, that belonged to, I mean, it's a little bit off, William the Conqueror. William the Conqueror, 1066. Okay? If you go back 100 years, more than, 1015, it'd be like having something that we could actually literally trace to King Alfred the Great. The only English monarch that gets that epithet, the Great. Okay? In other words, it would be worth an awful lot of money. And he gives her $10, essentially. Harry, he only gave her 10 galleons. Caractacus Burke was not famed for his generosity. So, she was in London near the end of her pregnancy. She was desperate enough to sell her one and only valuable possession. Harry, but she could do magic. What's Harry thinking? If you could do magic, what? Do you have any problems? No, just whip out your wand and all your problems go away, right? She could have got food and everything for herself by magic, couldn't she? What's Harry thinking? With a wand, you can do what? Whip up a 3-course meal out of air. Okay? He thinks with a wand, you can just make stuff out of nothing. We're going to find out in Book 7, you can't make food out of nothing. You got to have something to work with. There's a scene where he and Hermione and Ron are out, and Ron's all bitchy and gripey because he's hungry. And he's like, all we're eating is all this crap, and Hermione's like, well, if you would get me something that I could do something with it, okay? I can't just make food out of nothing, she tells him. Dumbledore. Well, maybe she could. That is, maybe Maripé could do magic. He says, but I'm thinking that she stopped using magic once Tom Riddle left her. Says it's also possible that her unrequited love and the attendant despair sapped her of her powers. So notice that. Unrequited love can kill a magical person's ability to do magic. Why? How does unrequited love, in what state does it leave you? Think of a line from the Sorting Hat song from Order of the Phoenix. It leaves you as Hogwarts was left when Slytherin left, quite
Diminished.
downhearted. And you have to have your heart fully functioning to be able to do magic. Because where does it come from? It comes from in here. Okay? It comes from in here. Doesn't mean you have to be capable of love. Because obviously, what do we see with Voldemort? So, any case, Dumbledore says, Maripé refused to raise her wand even to save her own life. Harry, she wouldn't even stay alive for her son? Dumbledore's eyebrows raise up. Could you possibly be feeling sorry for Lord Voldemort? Notice, no, said Harry quickly. Why does he say no so quickly? I'm sorry, Gandalf. I do not pity Gollum. And I don't want to. That's because you have not seen him. No, and I don't want to. Right? Why does Harry answer so quickly? What happens if he starts feeling pity for Voldemort? What's the prophecy say? Two go in, one comes out. If he's feeling pity for him, it's going to be kind of hard to kill him. Right? No. But she had a choice, didn't she? Not like my mother. Really? Move out of the way, silly girl. We heard Voldemort tell Lily. No, not my Harry. Take me instead. No. Move aside, I tell you. She had a choice. She had multiple choices. She could have said, okay, take him. But she doesn't. Your mother had a choice too, Dumbledore says. Yes, Maripé Riddle chose death in spite of a son who needed her. But don't judge her too harshly, Harry. She was greatly weakened by long suffering, and she never had your mother's courage. Why didn't she have Lily's courage? Well, obviously because she's not Lily. But why else? Think of her home life. She's been abused, seemingly, her whole life. She's treated as a slave. Okay? So, Harry asks, where are we going? Dumbledore says, this time you're going in one of my memories. Okay? And Dumbledore takes him to the orphanage where Voldemort was raised. Who runs the orphanage? She has a very Dickensian name. Like it's right out of a Charles Dickens novel. He likes names like Gradgrind. Okay? Mrs. Cole. What does the name suggest? You laughed. Why?
Well, it's like, I think of like Santa on the stockings Cole because you're bad.
Okay. What is Cole? Notice it's not Mrs. Butterfly. It's not Mrs. Pansy. Mrs. Flower, Mrs. Bunny, Mrs. Soft and Cuddly, Warm and Wonderful. Coal is what?
Hard.
Cold, hard, dark. Okay. Can it give heat? Yes. But what else does it give when it gives heat? Horrible smoke that kills. Okay. This is not a pleasant woman. This is a hard woman. So, and a drunk at that. So Dumbledore gets her drunk. He talks with her. Okay. And he says around page 263, I was wondering whether you could tell me anything of Tom Riddle's history. And she helps herself to more gin. And says, I remember it clear as anything. Because I just started here myself. New Year's Eve, bitter cold. Snowing, nasty night. And this girl, not much older than I was myself at the time, came staggering up the front steps. She wasn't the first. We took her in. She had the baby within the hour. And she was dead in another hour. Takes another generous gulp of gin. Dumbledore, did she say anything about the boy's father? She says, yes, she did. Hope he looks like his papa. And Mrs. Cole says, and I won't lie, I hope to too, because she was in a bad state. Okay? She says he was to be named Tom after his father and Marvolo for her father. Funny name. And last name Riddle. Tom Marvolo Riddle. We named him just as she'd said. And she says, and nobody ever came. He's a funny boy, Dumbledore. Thought he might be. Odd in what way? And she says, he's definitely got a place at your school, right? In other words, I'm not going to spill the beans about him unless I know he's out of here. Why? What does this tell us about her? She wants to be rid of him. Keep going. Why? Not only because of what he's done to other kids. She's afraid of him. Okay? I mean, think of it. This is, you have to understand the reference. This is a little Jeffrey Dahmer in the making. Okay? Serial murderer, eats people. Dumbledore, yep, we're taking him, don't worry. He scares the other children. You mean he's a bully? Well, I think he must be. It's hard to catch him, but there have been incidents, nasty things. Billy Stubbs' rabbit. Well, Tom said he didn't do it, and I don't see how he could have done, but even so, it didn't hang itself from the rafters, now did it? Little bunny. I shouldn't think so. I'm jiggered if I know how he got up there to do it. All I know is he and Billy argued the day before. She drinks more gin. And then we take him out to the countryside, once a year, or to the seaside. Well, Amy Benson and Dennis Bishop, they were never quite afterwards. After we got them out of that cave they'd gone into with Tom Riddle. It's like, okay, Tom, what'd you do with them in the cave? That's kind of creepy. He swore they'd just gone exploring, but something happened in there. And there have been lots of funny things. Okay? So, Dumbledore goes off, he talks to Tom Riddle. And what does Tom Riddle immediately attempt to do? Tell the truth! Harry hears and notices the command. And then he asks him, who are you? Because Dumbledore just sits there with this kind of strange look on his face. I've told you, my name is Professor Dumbledore. And so they go back and forth. Dumbledore says, there's a school for you. It's a school for magic. You're special. Tom says, I know. I've always known it. Okay. And Dumbledore says, you're a wizard. You can do magic. And at Hogwarts, we'll teach you how to control it. Okay? Channel it. Focus it. Dumbledore tells him where he needs to get his stuff. At Diagon Alley. He says, I can go with you. Tom says, nope, I can do it on my own. How old is he? He's 11. He's going to go off to Diagon Alley, a place he's never been to in London. He's going to do it all by himself. But he says, he's walked around the streets of London. And then just before Dumbledore leaves, this interview, he calls him Tom. And Riddle gives an irritable switch. This is probably around page 239 or so. You dislike the name Tom? There are a lot of Toms. Was my father a wizard? He was called Tom Riddle too, they've told me. I'm afraid I don't know, says Dumbledore. Now, is Dumbledore lying there? That is, this is the Dumbledore in the past. Was he lying when he told Tom Riddle, when Tom Riddle was 11, that he didn't know whether or not Tom Riddle's father was a wizard? No, he didn't know that. He didn't know the history, okay, that he knows now. My mother can't have been magic, or she wouldn't have died. Notice what Tom Riddle equates with magic. Immortality. If you're magic, you don't die. If you die, you're not magic. Okay? So, Dumbledore and Harry come out of the memory. And Dumbledore says, sit down, Harry. Harry, he believed it faster than I did. When Hagrid came to me, Dumbledore, yep, he was perfectly ready to believe that he was special. Harry, did you know then? Did I know that I had just met the most dangerous dark wizard of all time? No. I had no idea what he was to grow up to be. Okay? I had no idea that he was to grow up to be what he is. Interesting little thought experiment. Because this has happened recently in our crazy, utterly ludicrous political atmosphere. Some asinine journalist has started going around asking political, presidential candidates something to the effect of, I haven't seen the actual interview, I've just heard little snippets and read little snippets on the internet. You know, going up to people, candidates, and saying, knowing what you know now, would you abort Adolf Hitler? Interesting question. They asked Jeb Bush, he's, yeah, in a heartbeat. They asked Ben Carson, he said no. Why? Because I'm against abortion. He's against all abortion, no matter what. Life of the mother, which the kind of surgeon he is, he says that's a, canard anyways. Okay? What's the point? What's the point of the question? Are you really going to be hard against terrorists? That's just stupid. Because think about that for a moment. Was little Adolf in the womb the one responsible for the death of 6 million Jews and millions of Catholics and Protestants and gays and all kinds of others? You know, the Jews that were killed in the Holocaust, that number was smaller than the other number. And I'm not belittling what happened to the Jews. I'm just saying, what Hitler did wasn't only to the Jews. It was kind of across the board. He was an equal opportunity mass crazy. Okay? But the child in the womb wasn't guilty of those things. As Dumbledore might say, what happened or what didn't happen between being born and being elected Chancellor of Germany in 1933. What did he do during all those years? He made choices. He made one choice, and when he made that one choice, think of choices. There's a beautiful passage in a series of books I absolutely detest. Well, I take it back. I detest the second and third book. The first book I really, really love. Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials. The Golden Compass is a fantastic, beautifully written. Wonderful book. Amber Spyglass and the Subtle Knife are horrible for the simple reason that they're pure propaganda. He loses the story to make a point, and it becomes entirely about making the point. Anyways, in the first book, The Amber Spyglass, Golden Compass, there's a passage where somebody's talking about choices, and they say, when you make a choice, just before you make that choice, there are an infinity of universes. You make that choice and all those universes are gone. And now you're in the universe you've created. And then you come up to another choice and there's an infinity of possibilities. And you make your choice and what happens to all those possibilities? They're gone. Those possibilities are gone. It opens up new possibilities. Okay? Harry, did you know then, Dumbledore, did I know that he was going to be what he is? No. Why? Because at that time, I think it could be argued, he wasn't going to be what he is now. Because what could have happened? Or put it another way, Saint Marape didn't leave him at the orphanage. Say he was left somewhere else. What did Tom Riddle experience? Tom Marvolo Riddle experience at the orphanage? Describe his life. You know, when Pixar or DreamWorks, you know, when they make films that picture somebody being raised in an orphanage. I'm trying to remember the name of the one film, and it's drawing a blank. Animated film. How is the orphanage always depicted? How are orphanages always depicted in film or in literature?
Dark gray.
Dark, gray, what else? Depressing? Louder? Lonely? What do they lack? Love, joy, happiness, family, friendship, relationship. Instead, what do you see? It's each little kid out for himself. Why? Because of the idea that maybe I'll get chosen to be adopted. Because those that don't get adopted get left behind. They are the refuse. They are the, as Tom Riddle was, unloved. Tom Riddle never experienced love until he meets Dumbledore. No, I'm not talking about North American Man-Boy Love Association or anything like that. What do I mean? How does Dumbledore show him love? Does he have to offer him a space at Hogwarts? No, he does not. But he does. Okay? How is he treated at Hogwarts? Horribly? Is he treated like Hagrid is by certain people? Is he treated like Malfoy treats those beneath him? No. He's treated like an equal. He's treated like everybody else. Okay? This is going to be important because later on we're going to see a memory. I'm assuming we're going to get to it. We're going to see a memory where Tom Riddle comes back to school and he and Dumbledore talk about the old argument. Love. Okay? So, we find out he is a Parselmouth. Okay? And Dumbledore makes a point of pointing out to Harry about page 276 or 77 or so. One other thing. Tom Riddle collected trophies, and he didn't have any friends. Why is it significant that he collects trophies? partially for this. Okay? But I think J.K. Rowling is also pulling something from the real world into there about why he collects trophies. Who else in our society collects trophies? I don't mean your stupid little junior league participation soccer and football and all those participation trophies.
Seriously?
Serial killers. Almost to a T. Okay? They clip something off of the kill and keep them as a memento. Why? Because it signifies their power over that person. Even though that person's long dead and buried. Okay? Felix Felicis. Hermione thinks Harry uses the good luck potion to help Ron win the Quidditch match, but Harry only makes Ron think that he put it in his oatmeal or something like that, and he doesn't. Okay? Chapter 15, the Unbreakable Vow. I'm skipping a bunch, obviously. Let's see here. They talk about the Unbreakable Vow. They're at Slughorn's Christmas party, and this is around page 3. If I could do math. Around page 317 or so. Harry's there, and Slughorn's talking with Trelawney. And Trelawney's, wondering why Harry didn't go on with divination. Harry, being the nice boy that he is, doesn't say because you're a fraud, a crazy old bat. So Slughorn says, we all think our subject's the most important. And then he goes on and talks about Harry's mother. And he says, he talking about Harry, he's instinctive. That is talking about potions. Like he has a natural ability with it. Like his mother. I've only ever taught a few with this kind of ability. I can tell you that, Sybil. Why, even Severus. Kind of interesting that there we see a linking of Snape with Lily. Okay? Harry sees Snape go off with Malfoy, and he takes a look at Malfoy, and notice Malfoy looks horrible. But he spies on him, and he overhears Malfoy and Snape. What's significant about what Harry hears between Malfoy and Snape? I mean, Malfoy's trying to do something. Snape wants to help him. Malfoy won't let him. Is that all? Look at Malfoy's attitude towards Snape. What kind of language does he use towards him? How in the previous books has Malfoy talked to and about Snape? He's deferential. He respects him. He looks up to him. Here? No. It's not even that he looks at him as an equal. It's almost like he looks down at him. The Dark Lord gave me this task. And he says, you only want part of my glory. Okay? And Harry's not sure what to make of that. So, chapter 16. Because Harry heard Snape mention I made the unbreakable vow, he's talking to Ron about it. And Ron says, well, you can't break an unbreakable vow. Harry, I worked that out for myself, thank you. What do you mean? What happens? Well, you die. Fred and George tried to get me to make one when I was about 5. How would Fred and George have done that? How would they have had the ability to do that? Okay? So they're at the Burrow for Christmas, and Lupin is there, and Mr. Weasley, and they're talking about what's going on at the Ministry of Magic, and about page 330 or so, Harry finds out that the Ministry of Magic has sent Stan Shunpike off to Azkaban as a Death Eater. And Harry's like, this guy's a moron. He can't be a Death Eater. Okay? And they start to talk about Snape. And Harry asks Mr. Weasley, has it occurred to you, Mr. Weasley asks Harry, has it occurred to you, Harry, that Snape was simply pretending? That is what you overheard between Snape and Malfoy? Harry, pretending to offer help so that he could find out what Malfoy's been up to? Yeah, I thought you'd say that. But how do we know? What is Harry asking? What goes to the end of this? How do we know? He's asking about Snape. How do we know that Snape is really good? Or how do we know that Snape really is good? This is a question of what's called epistemology, branch of philosophy. Okay? And it's the branch that deals with how we know things. Okay? Empiricism, that is, our senses tell us one thing. How do we know things? How do I know this wall is hard? Because if I hit it hard enough, it'll hurt. And so pain tells me that. Okay? This is a very important question that Harry's asking, because this is going to be central to the next book. How do we know? Lupin, it isn't our business to know. Lupin, it isn't our business to know that Snape really is good. It's Dumbledore's business. Dumbledore trusts Severus, and that ought to be good enough for all of us. Why should that be good enough for all of us? Dumbledore trusts Severus. What is Lupin saying, implying but not saying? We trust Dumbledore. Okay? How far do they trust Dumbledore? If he put down a bed of coals and said, walk over, it won't hurt you. Lupin's implying, okay, and we'll do it. I mean, it's implicit. It doesn't need to be stated. But, say Dumbledore's wrong. People have said it many times. It comes down to whether or not you trust Dumbledore's judgment. I do. Therefore, I trust Severus. But Dumbledore can make mistakes. He says it himself. Okay? He looks Lupin straight in the eye. Do you honestly like Snape? What is Harry equating there? Trusting with liking. Do you have to like somebody to trust them? No, you don't. You really don't. You can hate somebody and still trust them. Lupin, I neither like nor dislike Severus. No, Harry, I'm speaking the truth. We'll never be bosom friends, perhaps. And after all that happened between James and Sirius and Severus, there's too much bitterness there. But I do not forget. Okay, now what is Lupin arguing from here? Personal experience. He worked for a year at Hogwarts. What did Snape do for him every month? Made the Wolfsbane potion. And he says, and because of that, I did not have to suffer as I usually do at the full moon. But he accidentally let it slip that you're a werewolf. Lupin, people would have found out anyways. Okay? And what does Lupin come down to? You are determined to hate him, Harry. Why? Because with your father and your godfather, it's almost like it's ingrained in you. You can't help it. What is he saying Harry has for Snape? You have inherited an old, what's the word he uses? Prejudice. What does it mean to be prejudiced? Pre, which means before, what? Judging. The judish means to prejudge. Harry has prejudged Snape. Why? on the basis of what he's heard about him because of his father and godfather. Dumbledore told Harry at the end of the first book, your father hated Snape and he hated your father. Boom! That's it right there. He hated my dad. My dad was a god. Until he sees his dad hanging him upside down. What should maybe happen a little bit there? Okay? But why is this important? Harry wants to know. Book 7, we're going to hear repeatedly the phrase, Harry didn't know what or who to believe. He wanted to know. He doesn't want to believe. He wants to know. What's the difference? Belief is faith. Knowledge is fact and reason. You don't believe that 2 + 2 = 4. That's fact. That can be proven unequivocally. You might believe in unicorns, right? But that's not a fact unless you can find one and prove that they exist. You might believe in Sasquatch, okay, or Bigfoot, or the abominable snowman. You might believe in God, but that's not a fact. Why? Because God can't be proven. Not by us. If you accept the idea of God, God could prove himself if God wanted to. God could do something right now, right here in this room, so that everybody in this room would walk out of here 100% thoroughly convinced God exists. Doesn't mean you would necessarily like it. That is, depending on your theology, you might still hate God, but it wouldn't mean that you then denied his existence. Okay? Harry wants to know. He doesn't want to believe. What's the problem with that? 90% of life probably is belief. You think you found the right person. You get all involved. You decide to get married. Do you know when you propose, when you decide to get married, that you're going to live happily ever after? Hell no. You don't and you won't. I say that with 30 years under my belt. Okay? You won't know that at that time. You believe that to be the case. When you elect somebody, when you pull that lever, punch that Chad, do you know that that person is going to be the kind of quote-unquote leader you think they're going to be? No. It's all belief, folks. When you walk out this room tonight, do you know you're going to make it home? No, you don't. How's that for being morbid? Or macabre?
Appreciate
I mean, several hundred people went to a rock concert the other night just wanting to have a good time. Did they know that they were going to go home that night? No, they believed they did, and some didn't. And many still haven't. Okay? So, an awful lot of life is belief based on what? Yesterday. And the day before that, and the day before that, and the day before that. Because we're, 10, 11, 12 weeks into the semester, and every other night that you've come to class, you've left, and you've shown up the following week. That experience tells you what? That I'll then come next week, and I'll go home after that. The sun rose yesterday, it rose today. That means, based upon my experience, it will rise tomorrow. The only problem is there are sometimes ripples, let's say, in our experiences. Ripples that we can't account for. Ripples that belief and knowing have nothing to do with. Okay? So, Harry's starting to wrestle with that already. And where are we? We're just about halfway through the book with 48 minutes to go. So Scrimgeour shows up. And Scrimgeour shows up to kind of put that whole knowing and believing thing in a new light to Harry. He shows up at the Weasley's house because he wants some answers to a couple things. One, he wants to know where Dumbledore goes when he leaves Hogwarts. He wants to know what he and Harry are doing off by themselves together sometimes. Okay? Page 342 or thereabouts. Scrimgeour says, man, rumors are flying. All this about the Chosen One. I assume Dumbledore has discussed these matters with you, Harry? Yeah, we talked about it. And what has he said? It's between us. Oh, no, if you're confident, I understand. He says, but, does it really matter whether you are the Chosen One? Harry, I don't know what you mean, Minister. Well, of course, to you it matters. If you're the Chosen One, if you're the one who has to off Voldemort, yeah, it matters to you. But, to the wizarding community at large, it's what? It's all a matter of perception. In other words, to the wizarding community at large, it's all public relations. It's what people believe that's important. Is he talking about the same kind of belief that I was just talking about? No, he's not. Harry doesn't say anything. People believe you are the Chosen One. You see? They think you're quite the hero. Which of course you are, Harry. But, if people thought that there was somebody out there who was looking out for them, if you could be seen, popping in and out of the ministry every now and then. Harry's like, I don't understand what you mean, Mr. Minister. Stand alongside the ministry. What does that mean? Oh, well, if you were seen popping in and out of the ministry from time to time. Showing up with the head of the Auror's office. And Harry, so you want me to give the impression I'm working for the ministry? It would give everyone a lift. What would that be akin to in our world? Assuming we had a chosen one. Take a superhero. Take the American superhero. Superman or Captain America. It would be like Superman or Captain America doing what? Being snapped.
Taking out ISIS.
Okay. But before that, being snapped, going in and out of the White House. Or going in and out of the Pentagon. Showing we're on your side. We're going to do right. If there were really a Captain America, what would that do for morale? Okay? Unfortunately, there's not. The Chosen One, it's all about what? Giving people hope. The feeling that things are happening. What kind of hope is he talking about? It's the same kind of hope. I'll use this example. Real world, I know you're going to get tired because I'm bashing Obama. The same kind of hope Obama kind of alluded to Friday morning. About 12 hours before the attack in Paris. ISIL, he said, is contained in Iraq and Syria. And what he meant was that they're not expanding in territory. And then they go knocking on the door in Paris. What kind of hope was that Isilus contained? False. What kind of hope is Scrimgeour talking about? What's the difference between false hope and real hope? Come on, you guys are all students. You all have, maybe not in this class, but maybe in other classes you've had false hopes before. Or here, I'll use an example. There are a couple people on the roll who've stopped attending, but they're still on the roll. They haven't dropped the class. If this semester goes like in almost every other semester for the last 20 years, 25 years almost, I'll probably hear from one of these students in the next 2 weeks. And they're going to ask me, what can I do to pass this class? That is, people who haven't shown up, and some of them haven't even taken the first exam. What do you think is their hope of passing the class? 0. It's not 1%. It's not even a snowball chance in hell. It's 0. Absolutely nil, nada. Okay? But I could say, well, you know, you could show up, you could turn in your final paper and take the exam. What kind of hope would that be? False. That would be lying through my teeth hope. That would be a romantic hope. Okay? But, say you have been here, and let's say you didn't do well on your first exam, and you did the rewrite, you got it back, and you got it a little bit better, but it still wasn't great. You know, it went from F to a D. Do you still have hope of passing the class? Yes, you do. And I don't mean passing with a D. Okay? That's not a false hope. It's a real hope. Of course, what does that hope entail? Work. That dirty 4-letter word. Work. Hard work. What is Scrimgeour talking about? No work involved. He just wants a picture of the poster boy. The Savior. Jesus. Kind of for the wizarding world. Harry. Well, but won't that seem like I approve what the ministry's up to? Well, yeah, that's kind of what we were here, but I don't. I mean, you threw Stan Shunpike into prison. Stan Shunpike was like the guy who made the stupid video about Muhammad that Hillary Clinton then blamed what happened at Benghazi on. It had nothing to do with the video. Nothing to do with it. Okay? So what does Scrimgeour say? Well, I don't expect you to understand. After all, you're 16. Harry's like, yeah, I'm 16. I kicked Voldemort's ass 2 years ago. Don't talk to me about Dumbledore's a law to order at 16. He doesn't think Stan should be in Azkaban either. You want to make me into a mascot. Well, you prefer, like your hero Dumbledore, to disassociate yourself from the ministry? I don't want to be used. Some would say it's your duty to be used. It's your duty to be a mascot. What does Harry do? Scrimgeour says, so you're not the chosen one? Harry, thought you said it didn't matter. Shouldn't have said that. No, it was honest, Harry says. One of the only honest things you've said to me. You don't care whether I live or die. You do care that I help you convince everyone you're winning the war against Voldemort. Notice, not that you're fighting the war, but that you're winning the war. And then what does he do? He holds his fist up. Why? Because Scrimgeour had the gall to say, Dolores Umbridge says you want to be an Auror. And what's on his hand? I must not tell lies. The scar written across his hand. I don't remember you rushing to my defense when I was trying to tell everyone Voldemort was back. Ministry wasn't so keen to be pals last year. So Scrimgeour finally says, so I guess you're Dumbledore's man through and through then. Aren't you, Potter? Harry, yes I am. Glad we got that straightened out until we get to the beginning of the next book. And then he's not Dumbledore's man at all. Then he doubts everything. Why? Because Rita Skeeter writes a load of bullshit about Dumbledore. Just one string of lies after the other. And Harry takes that to be truth. And Hermione's trying to teach Harry in that book, Harry, you've got 6 years of experience with Dumbledore. And you're going to let what Rita Skeeter says overpower all that? And he's like, I need to know. I need to know. Know what? Know on the basis of what? Is personal experience not a way of knowing something? Yes, it is. How many of you ever tried to do something really, really stupid when you were little? I mean really stupid. And pain. Pain like you never experienced before. Told you. Well, Nimrod, that was pretty stupid to do. One time when I was like 6 years old, they just re-graveled our street. I was on my bike and I thought, I'm going to ride down my street as fast as I can and see if I can do a U-turn around the manhole cover. Yeah. Really, really stupid. Because I got down there and I just turned those handlebars and pew, I mean, I was launched. It was like a catapult. Pew, and bit the edge of a curb with my chin. Got up, blood everywhere. Never tried that again. It's amazing what reality teaches. Okay? Reality's taught Harry an awful lot in the last 6 years. But he has somehow divorced it from up here. Okay? So, sluggish memory. Harry needs to get the memory from Slughorn about Tom Riddle asking about Horcruxes. We see Harry and Dumbledore off in their next lesson. Find out Morphin gets sent off to Azkaban. Dumbledore tries to protect him. Go on to, let's skip that one. Birthday surprises. It's Ron's birthday. Romilda Vane sends the chocolates. Ron falls in love. He gets poisoned. Harry saves his life at the end by shoving the Bazoar down his throat. Which is a nice little tie back to the first book. Very first lesson with Snape and potions. Snape asked him 3 questions. And he asked him what a Bazoar is. And Harry remembers here. Okay. Elf Tales. I gotta skip a bunch. Now we can skip all that. Chapter 20, Lord Voldemort's Request. We might have to do a little bit of this next week. Harry and Ron leave the hospital wing. They run into Luna. Harry goes up to Dumbledore's for a meeting. And Dumbledore asks how he's done with trying to retrieve the memory from Slughorn, about 425, 426, and Harry's kind of fudging. Dumbledore says, I hoped you would have returned to the task I set you, because we can't really do anything else until you get this memory. He's like, okay. So they go on, and Dumbledore says, I've got 2 more memories I want to show you. And he tells Harry about Tom Riddle's 7th year, top grades and everything. head boy, winner of the special award for services to school. Several teachers suggested he join the Ministry of Magic, but instead he goes off and joins Borgin and Burke's. He goes to work for a pawn shop, essentially. Okay? And Harry's like, what? But he wanted to stay at Hogwarts. Okay? And Harry says, Dumbledore tells him, firstly, and this is around 428 or so, firstly and very importantly, Voldemort was, I believe, more attached to Hogwarts, to the school, than he has ever been to a person. Hogwarts was where he had been happiest, the first and only place he had felt at home. Harry knows what that feels like. Secondly, the castle is a stronghold of ancient magic. Undoubtedly, Voldemort had penetrated many more of its secrets than most of the students, and he probably thought there were more to unravel. Third, as a teacher, he would have great power and influence over young witches and wizards. Okay? Harry, he didn't get the job? Dumbledore. No, he didn't. Dippet told him he was too young at 18, but invited him to reapply in a few years. Dumbledore didn't like that, but Voldemort went off to Borgin and Burke's. Okay? So he shows Harry the first of the memories he wants to show for him. And it's Hepzibah Smith and young Tom Riddle. And Tom Riddle goes to Hepzibah, and he's buying stuff from her. Okay? And we see some of the stuff he buys. Okay? For example, Hufflepuff's cup. And the locket. So, they come back out of the memory, and Harry and Dumbledore talk a little bit, and we find out, Voldemort altered her memory, and page 437 or 438, they talk about the locket, and Dumbledore's like, okay, he probably took the locket because he could see how it belonged to him. It had the S for Slytherin on it, he's heir of Slytherin, but why the cup? Dumbledore, it had belonged to another of Hogwarts' founders. I think he still felt a great pull towards the school, and he could not resist an object so steeped in Hogwarts history. In other words, this is like a relic. Okay? It holds magical power for Voldemort. So, next page. They're in Dumbledore's office, and Voldemort comes in. Not the snake-like Voldemort, but a younger, handsome Voldemort. And we hear Dumbledore, and we hear this interview. Good evening, Tom. Won't you sit down? Thank you. I heard that you'd become headmaster, a worthy choice. I'm glad you approve. Dumbledore offers him a drink. Tom takes it. So, Tom, to what do I owe the pleasure? They don't call me Tom now. These days I am known as, I know what you are known as, but to me I'm afraid you will always be Tom Riddle. And Dumbledore doesn't say it at this point, in his life, but I think it's almost implied that Dumbledore, it's almost like the young Dumbledore who's just become headmaster wants to say, I know what you're known as, but to me you'll always be little Tom Riddle. I'll always see you as that 11-year-old boy. Okay? It's one of the irritating things about old teachers, I'm afraid. They never quite forget their charge's youthful beginnings. He's not talking about him as the 18-year-old who left. So he raises his glass as though he's toasting Voldemort. Harry felt the atmosphere in the room change. Dumbledore's refusal to use Voldemort's chosen name was a refusal to allow Voldemort to dictate the terms of the meeting. And Voldemort knew that. So, Voldemort asks, I wondered why you haven't left the school. Dumbledore allows, or mentions, he's been offered the Minister of Magic a couple of times, 3 times actually, but he likes his job. Voldemort says, I've returned, And I think you must know that I have seen and done much since I left this place. Dumbledore, I know that you have seen and done much. Rumors of your doings have reached your old school, Tom. I should be very sorry to believe half of them. And then look at what Voldemort says. It's almost like a motto. Greatness inspires envy. Envy engenders spite. Spite spawns lies. In other words, what you've heard are lies. You must know this. Oh, so you call it greatness, what you've been doing? I have pushed the boundaries of magic further, perhaps, than they have ever been pushed. Of some kinds of magic. Of some. Of others you remain, forgive me, woefully ignorant. What's Dumbledore talking about? What kinds of magic has Tom pushed the envelope on? Dark arts. Okay? The old argument. Riddle says. But nothing I have seen in the world has supported your famous pronouncements that love is more powerful than my kind of magic, Dumbledore. That love is more powerful than my kind of magic. Okay? Notice what Voldemort says. Nothing I have seen in the world. What has he seen in the world? Louder?
An orphanage.
An orphanage. And what did he experience? No love.
Darkness.
Louder?
Darkness.
Darkness. Okay. Has he gone like the old, what was it, Stephen Bishop, Elvin Bishop, looking for love in all the wrong places? Looking for love in all the wrong faces? Okay. Where has he looked for it? Out there. Out there. Perhaps you've been looking in the wrong places. Notice Dumbledore doesn't spring Jesus on him. Oh, Tom, if only you knew Jesus, you'd know love. Come to Jesus and come to love. No, he doesn't do that. Okay. But Christ does say in the Gospels, where's the kingdom of heaven to be found? Inside. You're to go where? Specifically, in your heart. Okay? Well, then what better place to start my fresh researches than here? Notice what he thinks of love as. Something to be studied. Something to be examined. Something to be quantified. Rather than something to be experienced. Or something to be given. Will you let me return? Will you let me share my knowledge with your students? I place myself and my talents at your disposal. I am yours to command. Dumbledore. And what will become of those whom you command? What will happen to your Death Eaters? Voldemort hadn't expected that. Oh, my friends? Well, they'll carry on without me. I'm glad to hear that you consider them friends. I was under the impression they are more in the order of servants. What's the difference between a friend and a servant? Servants merely do your bidding. Friends do what? Friends share experiences. When you suffer, a friend suffers. When your friend suffers, you suffer. When your friend is elated, you are elated, etc. You are mistaken, says Voldemort. Then if I were to go to the Hogshead tonight, I would not find a group of them, not Rosier, Mulciber, Dolohov, awaiting your return. Devoted friends indeed to travel this far with you on a snowy night. Omniscient as ever, Dumbledore. Notice we're not told why he's omniscient as ever. We're given a clue maybe in book 7. Because we find out who the barkeep is at the Hogshead, but That's at the time frame of book 7. We don't know that the barkeep in book 7 at Hogshead is the same barkeep as at this point in time. But if it is, it would help explain some things. Okay? So, Dumbledore says, come on, let's be honest. Why are you really here? To request a job we both know you don't want. A job I do not want, on the contrary, I very much do want it. Well, you want to come back to Hogwarts. That's clear. You don't want to teach any more than you wanted to when you were 18. What are you after, Tom? Why not try an open request for once? Well, if you do not want to give me a job, of course I don't. And I don't think for a moment you expected me to. Nevertheless, you came here. You asked, you must have had a purpose. That's your final word? It is. Then we have nothing more to say to each other. Dumbledore, no, nothing. And the sadness fills his face. Why? Because of what he has to say. The time is long gone when I could frighten you with a burning wardrobe and force you to make repayment for your crimes. But I wish I could, Tom. I wish I could. Why can't he? Is it because Voldemort's too strong? Why can't he?
He's too far gone.
Is it because he's too far gone?
He wants to learn to make his own mistakes.
Because Dumbledore can't take away his freedom of choice. Could he put him under an Imperious curse? It's possible. Okay. Could he put a command of some kind? This is Dumbledore we're talking about. It's not only possible, it's probable. But he won't. Okay? And Harry notices Voldemort's hand twitches kind of on his wand. Harry, why did he come back? Did you ever find out? Dumbledore, I have ideas. Get the memory. Okay? So, I'm going to skip a bunch. We have the Unknowable Room. Yeah, I'll skip that. And after the burial, Aragog finally dies. And Harry goes down with the Felix Felicis and is there with Slughorn and Hagrid. And he gets Slughorn drunk, drops him the Felix Felicis, and he finally gets Slughorn to give him the memory. Okay? Kind of begs and says, you know, do it for Lily. And chapter 23, Horcruxes. Harry runs up to Dumbledore's office, and we see the memory around page 497 or so. We hear Slughorn explain about Horcruxes. Okay? But he says in order to make a Horcrux, you must do it by an act of evil. The supreme act of evil. Why is murder the supreme act of evil? In a sense, it is all three unforgivable curses wrapped up into one. Takes away your choice. It's painful. And it's, you're dead. Okay? So it's all three. Okay? So we hear all that, and Dumbledore then goes on to explain that Tom Riddle has torn his soul, and Dumbledore tells Harry that he thinks he's been encasing parts of his soul into Horcruxes. He talks about, Harry, you've already destroyed one, the diary. Okay? And he explains what Voldemort meant when he talked to the Death Eaters about I who have gone further along than anybody on the path that leads toward immortality. He was talking about Horcruxes, Harry. Horcruxes in the plural. Harry, so he's made himself impossible to kill by murdering other people? Harry, around 502 or so, or maybe it's 505, he made 7 Horcruxes? But they could be anywhere. Dumbledore. No, Harry, he didn't make 7. He made 6. The 7th part of his soul, however maimed, resides inside his regenerated body. And Dumbledore's wrong. He did make more than 6. We'll count them up when we get to book 7. So, the 7th piece of soul will be the last that anybody wishing to kill Voldemort must attack, the piece that lives in his body. So Harry goes, okay, so that means there's 6. How are we going to find them? You are forgetting you have already destroyed one of them, and I've destroyed another. Harry, you have the ring, Harry. So, diary and ring, there's 2 down. So 4 Horcruxes remain. They go on and they talk about the Horcruxes, and Harry finally says, the locket, Hufflepuff's cup. So there's 2 that they have to find. Dumbledore says, yep, I think those became Horcruxes 3 and 4. So the remaining 2, assuming again he created a total of 6, are more of a problem. He says, I hazard a guess that having secured objects from Hufflepuff and Slytherin, he set out to track down objects owned by Gryffindor or Ravenclaw. 4 objects from the 4 founders would have exerted a powerful pull over Voldemort's imagination. But he says, I am confident, however, that the only known relic of Gryffindor remains safe. What's the only known relic that Dumbledore is talking about?
The sword.
The sword. But it's not. What's the other relic? The sorting hat. After all, what does the sorting hat even say? The sorting hat is a relic, if we take its words literally, of all 4 of the founders. Because Gryffindor whipped his head off and they each put a bit of their brains in it. Like they used a pensieve, they took thoughts out, put it in the hat. So it's got elements, let's say, of each of the founders. So, Dumbledore goes on and says, I think I know what the 6th Horcrux is, the snake. Okay? And then he tells Harry, I think he was meaning to make the last Horcrux with your death. Harry, okay, so the ring's gone, the diary's gone, the cup, the locket, and the snake are still intact, and you still think there might be a Horcrux that was once Ravenclaw's or Gryffindor's. So they keep talking about the Horcruxes, and about page 507, Harry says, so if all those Horcruxes are destroyed, Voldemort could be killed? Dumbledore, I think so. Without his Horcruxes, Voldemort will be a mortal man with a maimed and diminished soul. It will take uncommon skill and power to kill a wizard like Voldemort, even without his Horcruxes. Harry, but I haven't got uncommon skill and power. Dumbledore, yes you have. You have a power that Voldemort has never had. Harry, oh great, here it is, the old argument again. Love. It was only with difficulty. Yes, Harry, you can love. Which, given everything that has happened to you, is a great remarkable thing. How different was Harry's upbringing than Voldemort's?
He had friends at all.
Family, I guess. So.
Okay, I don't mean at Hogwarts. Before Hogwarts.
Still lonely.
How different was being raised by the Dursleys than being raised by Mrs. Cole? Mrs. Cole at least took the kiddies out twice a year to go to the countryside or the seaside. When Harry goes with Dudley on Dudley's birthday trip to the zoo, that's the first time, we're told, he's ever gone. Where does he live until the letters start to come? Like under here, in the cupboard under the stairs, in the broom closet. Their first 11 years of life is not that different. or I should say the years from 1 to 11, are not that different. Harry does have his first year and a few months with his parents. Okay? Harry, so when the prophecy says a law of power the Dark Lord knows not, it just means love. Yes, just love. Harry, never forget that what the prophecy says is only significant because Voldemort made it so. Okay? This is really important. We'll finish with this chapter for tonight. He says, I told you this at the end of last year. Voldemort singled you out as the person who would be most dangerous to him. And in doing so, he made you the person most dangerous. Harry, but it comes to the same. No, it doesn't. You are setting too much store by the prophecy. Notice, what does Harry assume about the prophecy? What do we think when we hear the word of prophecy today? What does it mean? Something will happen. Okay? If you accept that prophecies can exist. Something will happen. Can anything change it? Think the old Greek myth of Oedipus. Oedipus' parents receive a prophecy. The one in your womb is fated to kill his father and marry his mother. And they're like, ew. What do they not do? They don't abort the child. They could have. They had abortion in ancient Greece. They let the child be born. They give him to a shepherd to expose him on a mountain. That is, take him off to the mountain and leave him. The shepherd takes him off to the mountain, pins his legs together, meaning he drives a nail between his ankles to pin them together. And then he comes across a messenger, another shepherd. And the messenger says, oh, poor little baby, let me take him. And he takes the poor little baby, he goes off to his town, gives him to his king and queen. They raise him as their own. The child hears a prophecy, you are fated to kill your father, sleep with your mother. He likes his father and mother, doesn't want to do either of those things. So he runs away. And when he runs away, he runs into a man at a crossroads. The man won't let him cross, so he kills him. Just so happens to look a little bit like him and to be old enough to be his father. Runs on to the next town, solves the riddle of the Sphinx, has a sexy queen, marries her, looks a little bit like him, and old enough to be his mother. Prophecies mean they're written in stone. That's what Harry's thinking. Okay? Dumbledore. No, it doesn't. But if Voldemort had never heard of the prophecy, would it have been fulfilled? No. Why not? Because he wouldn't have gone looking for the one born at the end of the 7th month, born of parents who have thrice, rejected or denied the Dark Lord, etc. But last year, you said one of us would have to kill the other, only because Voldemort made a grave error. That's the only reason. Okay? So he's trying to get Harry to think. Come on, Harry, think about this now. If Voldemort had never murdered your father, would he have imparted in you a furious desire for revenge? No. Of course not. If he had not forced your mother to die for you, would he have given you a magical protection he could not penetrate? No. Don't you see? Voldemort created his worst enemy, just as tyrants everywhere do. So, Voldemort, he says, singled out the remarkable person who sits here in front of me and gave him the tools for the job. He says, after all, after everything you've been through, Harry, you've never been seduced by the dark arts. Never, even for a second, shown the slightest desire to become one of Voldemort's followers. Well, of course I haven't. You are protected, in short, by your ability to love. The only protection that can possibly work against the lure of power like Voldemort's. That is, love is the only protection. Why? Notice what he says it is. It's the only protection against the lure of power like Voldemort's. Why is it a protection? What does power give you? You think. Control, security, strength. What does love do? Love is like the antimatter of all of those things. Think about it. What does it mean to be in love? What do you put yourself in when you fall in love romantically with another person? What do you give that person?
Control.
Here, hold this. Be careful with it. It's fragile. Listen to any country music, man. Song. She done tore my heart out. Stomp that sucker flat, you know. Right? It means you make yourself totally vulnerable. You give control over yourself to somebody else. It means you have no security. You have no power. Okay? But now Voldemort knows all that. Harry, but it all comes down to the same thing. Second to the last page of the chapter. Doesn't it? I mean, it all comes down to, I've got to try and kill him or Dumbledore. Got to? Got to? Like somebody's, got their hand in their back and they're moving you? Of course you got to. But not because of the prophecy. Because you yourself will never rest until you've tried. Why will Harry not rest? Until he's tried to stop Voldemort. What does Voldemort do to other people? All the time. And what does Harry do for other people? All the time. Voldemort always hurts other people. Harry always tries to stop their hurt. It's like matter, antimatter. Pain. What's the opposite of pain? Joy. Anger. Love. Hatred. Love. We both know it. Imagine, please, just for a moment, that you never heard the prophecy. How would you feel about Voldemort now? Come on, think. And Harry says, I'd want him finished. A flame seemed to leap inside his chest. Not his belly, not his head, his chest. Why? Because it's the seat of the heart. That flame, to use an old word, is the ardor of love. It's the heat of love welling up. I'd want him finished, and I'd want to do it. Of course you would. You see, the prophecy does not mean you have to do anything, but Voldemort marked you as his equal. In other words, but you're the only one who can. Notice that. Dumbledore can't. Snape can't. In other words, you are free to choose your way, quite free to turn your back on the prophecy. Harry could go off to America. Only problem is, what would Voldemort do? Hunt him down. He will continue to hunt you, which makes it certain, really, that one of us is going to end up killing the other. And Harry comes up with this image. This will blow your mind. It was, he thought, the difference between being dragged into the arena to face a battle to the death and walking into the arena with your head held high. There's only one arena in the world that's ever existed that describes what Harry's talking about or what Harry's thinking about. There's only one time, one instance in the history of the world where people have been either dragged into an arena or walked into an arena, heads held high, to face certain death. Anybody know where it was? The Colosseum. The old gladiatorial fights. The old gladiatorial fights, okay, were like 95%. The people who were fighting the gladiators weren't necessarily other gladiators. Some of them were slaves. But after Christianity came around, it was the Christians during the persecutions of the Christians. And we have written eyewitness accounts, multiple written eyewitness accounts, okay, of some Christians being dragged in kicking and screaming. And we have many, many more of Christians walking, not even chained, walking into the arena to face gladiators, to face lions, to face tigers. That's the image Rowling creates. Some people perhaps would say there was little to choose between the two ways. Notice, what's the end result? You're dead. Is that the important part? How do you approach death? Kicking and screaming? Who in the novel faces death kicking and screaming against it? Voldemort. And who approaches death head held high, chest thrown out? Cedric? Sirius? Harry? Book 7? I won't name everybody else in Book 7. Okay? There's an awful lot of people. I argue, especially, when I do my Harry Potter course in London, I'll stop with this. All 7 books are about one thing. The art of dying well. The good death. They're about being prepared for death. If you watched or heard anything about the Ethiopians who were martyred last January, February, whenever it was, the 21 Ethiopians who were killed by ISIS on the beach in Libya, if you heard anything about that, and in fact it happened again this past summer when a bunch of Christians were killed by ISIS, on the recording that ISIS showed of them getting their heads cut off, you could hear, just before the knives start to cut, you could hear one of the Ethiopians say in his language, "Forgive them." Okay? That's what Harry's talking about. Head held high. None of them beg for release. None of them beg for their lives. Why? They're prepared. They're ready. As Dumbledore says at the end of book 1, their minds are well organized. They're prepared for the next great adventure. Okay, we'll stop there. We'll spend a few minutes finishing up this because